Welcome to the Brighton Heights Vitality Series, and this is episode 14. We are so excited. The topic is Ask the Chef, and we're going to talk about how to enjoy the holidays without wrecking our health, which is very exciting. We all love to enjoy the holidays. We don't want to wreck our health in the process. So again, thank you very much for joining. Today's webinar is sponsored by Brighton Heights, which Brighton Heights will be a first of its kind senior living community located in Pewee Valley, Kentucky. Brighton Heights will promote a life of healthy living and change amongst seniors and is expected to welcome residents hopefully in the 2024 timeframe. For more information on Brighton Heights, you can visit brightonheights.org. Here in a moment, I will introduce today's guest, but first a few housekeeping items. Please feel free to ask questions through the chat window, or if you are joining us through Facebook Live, feel free to leave your questions in the comments. We will monitor them throughout, and we will be taking your questions actually during the webinar. Chef Ken Rubin really wants to make this interactive, so if you have questions as he's talking, just pop them in, and he will be watching for those himself as well, and we'll take those questions. Please be advised that this is for informational purposes only, of course, and it does not constitute medical advice, and viewers should seek the opinion of a healthcare professional. So with the holidays quickly approaching, many of us are wondering, how will we stick to our balanced and healthy diet
Susan, are you there?
Tips to stick to our diet? Well,
go ahead.
Okay. Where he educates on clean eating. He is a nationally recognized chef, educator, and food anthropologist with more than 25 years of culinary experience. If you would like to learn more about Chef Rubin's work, visit www.ruby.com, and that's ROUXBE. And then also you can check out https://thebigswitch.com. So Chef Ken, before you get started, would you please share with us a little bit about how you became so passionate about clean eating?
Well, thank you, Susan, for hosting today. And just a real pleasure to be here and to have an opportunity to share more about something I'm really passionate about, which is cooking and eating food that makes you feel good, looking towards the future for yourself and ways to really implement some healthy lifestyle choices around increasing your consumption of plant-based foods. So it's a real honor to be here. My journey in food started really at a very, very young age. I started developing an interest in food when I was a teenager and started seeing for myself the differences in the way I felt, the energy I had, my level of fitness, how I slept, even things like the inflammation that I felt with my joints and things like that. I noticed at a pretty early age that food had an impact on me. It changed the way I felt, how I kind of saw the whole world. So early in my life, I really began to make these connections around food and health. And even though I had an interest in cooking at an early age, it took me some time, to develop the deeper interest in kind of, why plant-based, the science of nutrition, more the whys and hows of how all these things work versus just kind of the what around good food and delicious flavors and how to use ingredients and things. So when I started my own personal plant-based journey going back over 30 years ago, it was really based for myself in this personal connection, this attachment that I had to food and cooking, and the realization that that food is medicine, that it's very, very real. So my career as an anthropologist, as a chef, as an educator has really circled around a lot of these conversations for a long time. So even in positions that I've had where I wasn't a plant-based chef or I wasn't opening a plant-based cooking school, more of a classical cooking school when I worked for Le Cordon Bleu or the Art Institutes or lots of other big culinary schools, still having an attention to, well, we should focus on these things that we know are important foods for people's health, fruits and vegetables, whole grains, legumes, healthy cooking techniques that don't involve an excess of oil or salt, or techniques that are inherently unhealthy, like frying food and so on. So these things have all been sort of the underpinnings for me, for many, many years. And they've really led me into the role that I've been in for the last 10 years or so with Ruby, and more recently with Switch. And Ruby is a large online culinary platform that's used globally. We have hundreds of thousands of learners from all around the world, both home cooks through programs like our Forks Over Knives program, which is a very popular plant-based eating program, all the way to professional training programs that we host and manage for big food service companies, big hospitality companies, and so on. But for me personally, it's just kind of part of my DNA to be involved with Ruby and Switch to help people learn to cook more. Switch in particular with our mission there to help people cook more and eat more plant-based foods, fruits and vegetables, whole grains, legumes, and so on.
Awesome. Now you'll have to explain, and I know you're going to get into it in more detail, what Switch is, why it exists, and who it's for.
Yeah, so I'm going to spend a little bit of time today. We'll just go through a few quick slides about Switch, but I actually today was going to have time to dive right into the actual Switch platform.
Yeah.
So if anyone in the audience, as I'm going through these first just few slides, talking through kind of high level, you see some food that you like or whatever it is, just kind of hold your thought for a moment, because we'll go into the live site where I'll be able to share a little bit more about Switch. So thank you, Katie, for advancing these slides. So right out of the gates, I'll just start by saying, so much of the attraction of eating well and eating more plant-based food, eating for health, really starts with this notion that your food has to be really craveable. It has to be delicious tasting and delicious looking. So a lot of that, when you're looking here at the Switch visuals, is supposed to make you feel hungry. It's supposed to make you want to eat the food. And we purposefully put food in front of people that has a lot of color, a lot of texture, a lot of appeal for people. So that's kind of our starting point. You can move on to the next slide. So here's our goal. I've said it before, but I'll say it again. It's really, with Switch, our goal is to help people eat more fruits and vegetables, to become more comfortable in the kitchen. Ultimately, for many people, when they think about becoming more plant-based or eating more fruits and vegetables, or even just diversifying their diet, the first response for many is resistance, right? They don't want to make a change, or they think the change is not going to taste good or not going to be something that they're going to enjoy. We just really want to make you eat all those foods that you should eat, that your doctor probably talks to you about, or maybe your partner talks to you about. So it's not about having a big, club and hitting you over the head with nutrition information. We're really more about saying, look at how beautiful this food is. Look at how approachable it is. When you look at it, we want you to feel hungry, and then we're going to help translate that into cooking.
Beautiful.
So Switch is free. So we'll start with that. So if you go to swich.com or thebigswitch.com, both will take you to the same place. We have a standard kind of get into the program with some onboarding questions. These questions right out of the gates are going to help you just share a bit more about yourself. The idea is that we're trying to personalize your experience a bit with us. So in this basic onboarding process, it takes just about 2 minutes. We're going to ask you about some of the flavors, the types of cuisines that you tend to enjoy. We're going to ask you a little bit about your skill level. We're going to ask you some questions to get you thinking about, what is it you're currently doing now in terms of fruit and vegetable consumption. So that onboarding experience essentially helps populate what we call the switchboard, which is kind of like the user dashboard. And when I show you the live site here in just a few minutes, I'll show you a switchboard that I built specifically for this event, where you can see some recipes and some cooking techniques and some things that might be more relevant. After the onboarding process, you'll be presented with an opportunity to develop a cookbook, finding recipes that kind of suits your palate. You can go in and actually also identify some specific types of skills development or some technique-based learning that you might want to do. So if you really are scared of using a knife and the idea of cutting up fruits and vegetables is horrifying to you, you might start off with how to handle a knife safely or how to use a knife type of lesson. Or if you're really interested in learning about beans, you might start off with a lesson about types of beans and cooking beans more broadly before we get into bean-based recipes and things like this. So what you have here on the screen is just a visual of a switchboard that shows some of the options for learning within that page. And you'll see there on the other side of the left hand on the page there, and again, we'll see this all live. You'll see that there's an opportunity to see people's submissions, to learn about other people in the community, to kind of be more involved with some of the other people who are engaging. And yeah, just to reinforce, we are all about really making you more successful in the kitchen. So while there are lots and lots of recipe sites out there, we developed Switch and Rouxbe to really help you activate how those recipes are going to be used. So you might find a recipe on a blog or in a cookbook or from your neighbor or from your mom's recipe box. And part of what we do is we help translate that recipe from a technique and a skills basis so that when you're reading the recipe, you actually know how to execute it well. So that when you're, for instance, oven roasting, that the results you get on those oven roasted vegetables is really beautiful. You've got brown, crispy edges. You've got nice texture on the outside with some crispiness or crunchiness. You've got an interior that's fully cooked, but not overcooked and too soft or mushy. And that's all a result of knowing how to roast, right? Proper temperature, proper pan, proper size of your vegetables, placement in the sheet pan, and so on. And that same concept you can apply to things like stir frying, or making a vinaigrette, or making a vinaigrette without oil, or sauteing without oil, or poaching, any of these techniques that become the underpinnings for lots of other recipes.
Perfect.
And this is just a bit more about our community. I love our community. We have about 125,000 people within the Switch world right now. They're all plant-based. They're all learning. Many of them eat a varied diet, including meats and dairy items, but come to us because we can help them with that one piece of the puzzle that they're struggling with, that puzzle piece around making the vegetables taste good, making them attractive, getting your family to eat them, and keeping that inspiration point alive and well. We hear from a lot of people time and time again that they just don't know what to cook. They don't feel like when they open up the refrigerator and are looking at vegetables that they have in their mind's eye something that they're going to really enjoy or really crave. And we help translate that. So this Switcher submission page is actually a page of real life home cooks from all around the world who are giving it their best shot, trying to learn new things, maybe inspired by a recipe they saw on Switch that they're recreating and posting and sharing a bit about their process. But also we'll see people in this submission who take a recipe idea and then make it their own, right? They see a recipe for a beet hummus and they make it a yellow beet hummus, or they have a recipe for a bean dish and they put a different salsa with it and things like this. It becomes pretty exciting. I love looking at the Switcher submissions in the Switcher community because these are really people who are actively engaged in kind of putting their best foot forward, right? They're not claiming to be expert chefs. They're not claiming to be super at what they're doing, but they're giving it a good shot. They're making themselves a little bit vulnerable, a little bit open, and they're asking for people to support them, to give them a high five virtually, to let them know that their recipe looks good or that they might want to, someone else might want to try it, and these sorts of things. So for me, it becomes very supportive. There's so much fear and anxiety and negative thought process that sometimes surrounds the cooking process, that we try to use this space as a way to really give people kind of a big hug, let them know it's going to be okay, that their food doesn't have to be perfect every time, that they're not professional chefs, but they can still take a few ingredients, right? Some spinach and some onions and some mushrooms or some kale or whatever, and make something really delicious. It doesn't need to be fancy or expensive or specialty food. This is about everyday superfoods that are going to be delicious, make you feel good, and things that you're going to want to eat, every day. And that's a big part of what we're pushing on here.
That's great. I just have to toss in here. My husband, he had gone plant-based several years ago. Then when COVID hit, he rebelled and he went back to his carnivore and dairy preferences. And so anyway, fast forward, when I make him dishes that are plant-based, the reaction I get many times is, wow, that was really good. It's like
Right.
It's a surprise. But to your point, and to the credit of all these people that are submitting these things, you start having a lot of fun with it. And then you are surprised when you understanding how to put things together different. Like one of the things I learned was about, when I make a soup, I always add like a little splash of lemon, and then it gives it the right taste in the mouth, and if I've used tomato sauce, then I don't need to do that. But just those little things that you learn along the way from going through this type of process that help bring your dishes alive, I guess, is what I'm saying. So, anyway.
Yeah. And that's a great example, Susan, the idea of finishing a dish with a little bit of acid, some lemon juice, some citrus, even depending on the dish, some vinegar, balsamic vinegar, things like that, where it's that right touch at the right time, where it really elevates the dish. It makes it something that might have felt too
like something was
base.
missing.
Yeah, something was missing. Like it was too deep down and you wanted it to be lifted up, and it wanted it to excite your taste buds in a little bit of a different way. And oftentimes with plant-based food, acid is the trick, right? A little bit of that acidity, that brightness, that freshness, in many cases is what that dish wants, in particular at the end to finish it. So it's really kind of on the tip of your tongue in terms of a flavor. And it's the thing that gets your saliva going, so that when you take a bite, it feels really good. And then the result of that, as you're chewing and swallowing, is that you want that next bite, right? You're trying to get that next point of satisfaction. And that's really what we're going for when it comes to these plant-based foods. These are all tricks and things, by the way, that chefs do all the time with all the unhealthy food, right? So if you put fat and sugar and salt and all these other things on top of food, those are all things that naturally as human make us just want to keep putting it in our mouth. So with the plant-based and healthier foods, we have to find those alternatives that are flavor forward, that make your mouth really happy, that aren't those kind of cheap, easy tricks that that chefs use in conventional restaurants, or that people in the world of processed and packaged food certainly know in terms of creating things that are just hitting on all those different notes for people, but in a very unhealthy way. There's a reason why people become addicted to certain types of food. It's because there's a certain response or mechanism that gets them to want to keep doing it. So we're trying to create that in ways that are going to be more sustainable and make you feel good, right? We're not trying to make people sick or slow you down here.
Right. Very good. Yeah, I know one of those tricks is MSG, right?
Yeah, chefs will use that. They'll use tons of salt, sugar in unexpected ways, fats in places where you think you wouldn't possibly need to add or want more fat. There's all kinds of things that, whether it's a chef or the food manufacturing industry will use to bolster flavors. And, what we try to do with Switch is to say, hey, you can use things from the produce aisle, things from your pantry, to create a lot of those really awesome sensations, to make food craveable, to make you want to take that next bite.
And yet it's good for you and not bad for you. So perfect.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, let's go. Katie, if you could let me share my screen, I will just bring you into a live Switch site here. And let me know if you can see this. Are you able to see the screen?
Yes.
Wonderful. Okay. So here we are. We're in Switch, and one of the great things about this platform, and really one of the reasons why we built Switch as a differentiator compared next to Ruby, was to give people a really easy access point into this world of cooking. So what you're looking at here on my main page is exactly what you would see if you were a member of Switch. You came in for free and you made some selections and you said, yeah, here's some things I'm kind of interested in. So when I'm looking here on my Switch page, here live, I'm able to be on my switchboard. I'm in my Discover area, which is a way for me to learn new things. Or if I just want to go straight into my cookbook, I can click into my cookbook page and I can see what my area of focus is, meaning what am I cooking next? These are all the things that I most recently added to my switchboard. And I'll go through some of these.
Now, question,
Mhm.
just real quick. So for when folks decide to go in and create one of these, how do you get something from the Discover page to your cookbook? Is it like a
So when you're in the Discover page or any of these pages and you're kind of looking around, if you want to add something, you just click the plus and it adds it straight to your cookbook.
perfect? Okay.
Yeah. So any of these things, if it's a group you can join, which might be more of a place to submit, or if it's something where you want to do a learning activity, or like, for instance, here's learning about different types of foods. Here's about holiday cookies. Here's, winter recipes that are drink based. You can kind of search around here and find things. The discovery process is really fun for people. I think once people kind of go through that, they become really fluent back and forth between the Discover page and their cookbook page. But I wanted to show just a few things that I added into my cookbook that make it sort of unique. So I have my focus area, my learn section, and then my recipes section where I can do it again if I want to. So just because I cooked it, it's not going to go away from this section. So this is the kind of my recipe area that I can add to and everything else. Now, one of the fun things about this also is I can essentially begin to plan out a menu or a calendar. So if I wanted to set a date, a target date for when I wanted to cook these things, I could say, hey, I want to make this cashew cream, 3 days before my big meal, because I know I'm going to use that cashew cream in a salad dressing, but I don't want to make it the day of. So I could go here and set a date, which would change the order at which these are displaying. But some of the really fun recipes I wanted to jump into, and again, I chose some holiday family friendly type recipes, things that would be recognizable to people, so that when you're looking at a menu, you're not saying, oh, it's going to be plant-based food, it's going to be a bunch of salads or just a bunch of cut up vegetables, with some broth or something really boring. But we're trying to actually make it super fun. So I'm going to jump in here to a really great recipe which uses cashew cheese, cashew cream as a base. And this is a pimento cheese spread, something that you would see, on menus at different homes all around. We've, like I said before, very, very visual. We want people to say, wow, like I can do this. So it starts off with a cashew cheese base. And we, again, have recipes for that on Switch. And then we show you the things you'll add to it. So some nutritional yeast, some lemon juice, some roasted bell peppers, a little bit of salt. And then blending those things together, you can see how absolutely creamy and delicious it becomes. Looks like something you want to spread on something. And then you get really delightful, attractive presentation that you can have with crudité, with raw vegetables, with some crackers, on whole wheat toast, however you like. There's some really, really fun opportunities here in terms of the recipe. Oop, I should have stayed in there. In addition to the visuals, of course, we give like a recipe process that links back into the cream cheese, cashew cream cheese base that we talked about. And this is also a place where you could see that if you did this, you could upload your submission. So when we were in the presentation before, I was showing the submissions page. If I were to make this recipe and take a photo and drop and drag it in and post it, my picture would then appear in that submissions gallery. And all of you could say, hey, Chef Ken, I love your version of pimento cheese. You put smoked jalapenos in yours to make it really spicy. We're going to stick with the smoked paprika because we don't like quite that much heat, but we like all the other flavors and the texture. This, by the way, that pimento cheese makes a great spread on a sandwich. If you're doing like a roasted veggie sandwich, it makes a great dip. It just does a lot of great things, and you can really alter the flavor. So some people like it to be more acidic or more spicy or more smoky. And there's just a lot of things you can do with it there. We'll jump into some other recipes here. Which of these looks good to you, Susan?
Well, you had told me about, I don't see it yet. There it is. Tell me about the gravy. Gravy at holiday meals is a requirement. And so how can we make a gravy that isn't bad for us, but tastes really good? And you said,
yeah. So this is a really simple gravy. The recipe here has some plant-based butter in it, but you can do it 100% oil-free or plant-based butter-free. But essentially, this is a recipe that leverages a really high-quality vegetable stock to build the base of the flavor. And then we're just thickening it out. We're adding onion and some really delicious flavors to this and just making a really creamy base. I take this base, and because I love mushrooms, I add about 2 tablespoons of dried porcini mushroom to it. And that makes a really, really intense mushroom gravy. If you add some thyme or some rosemary to that, even better. But this is a gravy base. We see here, this is quote, country fried chicken, but it's tofu, right? So it's tofu done in the oven with a breading on it, with gravy, steamed kale, and mashed potatoes. And just a plate that I think most people would approach and say, wow, that looks really good. I wouldn't think that's tofu. I've got this beautiful creamy gravy. I've got these bright greens. People are going to want to dig into that. But again, the gravy's a base. You can do infinite types of variations on that. I do the mushroom or caramelized onion or the addition of some of those other herbs in there. This loaf, this seed loaf, is a great, really, really great holiday main course as well. We just get amazing feedback on this from people who like to eat meat, who miss that texture of something like a meatloaf. But in this case, something that is really, really packed with amazing flavor and fiber. You can see it's got just a huge assortment of mushrooms, and it's got garlic, it's got ground nuts and seeds, some hemp seeds here, a little bit of mustard. It's just got a ton of things building flavor. And just like quote a meatloaf, you process it, put it into a pan, and then bake it. And then when it's cooled, you can slice it. This is little like muffins you can make in a muffin pan for individual servings. So just kind of playing off the ability to have like a really nice, elegant main course. Again, if that's something that you served on a plate to a person who loves meat, they're going to get a lot of great satisfaction with creamy mashed potatoes, a really umami, texture-rich nut and seed loaf, and a little bit of reduced gravy sauce underneath there.
And what I'd like to point out, because it's obviously very common for all of us to get together with a large family, and there may only be a few people there that don't eat meat. And it's like, well, you don't want to make it one or the other. And so I've been known to just bring something like that. So I have a protein for myself, but others can eat it if they want to. They don't feel obligated to. And then they're like, oh, this is good, but they still have and all that. So I think something like that is a great addition, so people have options.
Yeah. Well, the scenario, Susan, that you just described is one that I've seen in my own life work out hundreds of times.
Okay.
Where I, my people in my friend group know that I'm a chef and they know that I'm plant-based leaning, and they're excited because the chef is bringing food, but they're unsure what I'm going to bring because they know I'm not going to bring roasted chicken or whatever, right? So
Right.
when I show up, number one, I'll usually bring more than one thing because I want to show people some variety, and it gives me something to do when I'm contributing. I have a hard time going to a potluck with just one item. But when I show up, it's that same response of, yeah, I made this so I know that I can have awesome things and I'm not going to have to worry about this or that or the other, asking questions or making people on edge or uncomfortable about what they made.
Right.
But the response that you describe where others go, well, what is that? Oh, that looks really good. Can I try that? Oh yeah. Like I brought it for everyone, not just for me to eat and then take home the rest of it. I did bring it for everyone. And, especially when I bring foods that really pop with color, and I take just a little bit of extra time to present it a little bit nicely, so it's not coming in a tinfoil tray or whatever, and it's got fresh herbs on top and maybe some sauce to go with it. People look at it and they don't think, oh, that's crazy Chef Ken and his plant-based nut loaf. They think, wow, that looks really beautiful. That looks really interesting. I eat lentils. I eat sunflower seeds. Why wouldn't I like that? So we're able to flip the narrative away from, I don't really want that. I came here for the roasted ham, to, wow, that actually looks like the most interesting thing on the table. I'm going to give it a try. It's just a much different mindset for them to come into, and one where they feel very, very safe ultimately. And that's all I want is for them to taste it.
Right. And then they're open to the possibility of, expanding that as time marches on. Right.
Yeah, that's absolutely what happens. I think for some people, they don't consider themselves a plant-based person, and that's perfectly fine. We're not trying to convince you to become a plant-based person with Switch. We're really about saying, hey, join Switch because you probably know you should eat more fruits and vegetables and whole grains and beans. Maybe your doctor even told you that, but your big issue is, how do I do it in a way that tastes good, looks good, feels good, that my family isn't going to say, ooh, what is that, like brown stuff in a bowl, or that all looks just like a bunch of boiled beans or just chopped up raw vegetables, and that's good and all, I'm sure it's healthy, but like that's not exciting to me. So shifting the narrative to say, yeah, first and foremost, we want you to be attracted to this. We want you to say that tastes good, not, oh, I'm doing something for my health. Like you're doing something for your taste buds, right? You're doing something that's going to make you excited about eating more of this food. And that's really why we built Switch. Is if you want to have your meat on the side, but you want to include more vegetables, Switch is perfect, because we're going to really help you cook those vegetables. And over time, you might be less inclined to eat that animal protein. You might say, you know what, I'm perfectly good having this vegetable soup. It's very filling, it's delicious, it has beans or whatever it might be. And that's what we actually see from people is they say, yeah, I don't feel like by eating all these new foods that I'm depriving myself. I don't feel like someone's taken something away from me. I feel like you've given me all these new things. Like what a gift. You've given me the ability to cook green vegetables 5 ways, to eat root vegetables in a way I never thought was possible, or to look at spices or flavors in a way that goes, wow, I've always had carrots just with salt and pepper roasted, but what if I put, harissa from North Africa, or I put this sauce from Spain, or I put this smoked chili from Mexico? Wow, that really changes the flavor, in a good way towards the part of the world that I like, flavors of the world that I like. It could be Indian, it could be Vietnamese, it could be North African, it could be, whatever, Greek. that's part of the excitement, is like, you don't just need to cook the black beans one way.
Right. Well, I think I shared with you, I know we're getting a little off script here, but it's just fun to talk about this kind of stuff. My mother made, when I was growing up, a homemade soup that she always used shredded, beef, the stew meat. And I made it recently, and I wasn't even realizing that I was making it, but I realized when I was done, it tasted like it. But I had used lentils and cannelli beans. And it tasted just like it. It just didn't have the meat in it, but the flavors were all there. And I got really excited thinking, okay, yeah, I don't have to have the meat for it to remind me of home and the, memories and tasting the way I want it to taste. So that's exciting. And the other thing I was going to share is Thanksgiving, I've become the person that brings a huge veggie tray with some different, healthy dips. And I think we all feel better because we know we've been snacking on healthy stuff while we're waiting for the unhealthy stuff to get ready.
Mm-hmm.
And it's gotten to where I think everybody expects that because they it kind of helps balance out. So it's another suggestion is to go that route versus chips and that kind of and unhealthy dips and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think people do appreciate feeling better. They appreciate not eating a meal and feeling sluggish or weighted down or, oh my gosh, what just happened?
Or knowing for a fact you just put on 5 pounds.
Right. Yeah, that it was some excess number of calories, or that you want to take a nap right afterwards, and all these things.
Yeah.
I want food to make you feel, energized. I want you to feel alive. I want you to have, with the food that you've just tasted, a new story to tell that you've never had. Rutabaga, but you just had the most amazing rutabaga fries out of the oven that were, interesting and delicious and crispy and all these things. And then, the other thing that you said, Susan, that was, interesting to me about your mom's soup that you were able to recreate with lentils and beans, is that, the memory component, the way that food and the way things smell and taste are so important for our sense of community, our sense of family.
Yes.
The memory of the meal in some ways is, that smell of the thyme and the rosemary, or that cumin or the spice or whatever it is. So just being really aware, like you described, that you don't need to have the meat or the cheese to be the basis of the flavor, that you've got at your disposal this amazing array of fresh herbs and dried spices, whole spices, ground spices, different vinegars, different types of citrus, different ways to even build flavor with things like mushroom stock or vegetable stock or roasted veggies and things like this that form the basis of the new flavor, right? This is what's really exciting. And for some people, it's very eye-opening to say, well, you like that dish because the smoked paprika and the cumin, not because of the meat item in there. You can replace that meat with some other thing that's going to be hearty or have a texture or a certain other flavor. But let's focus on what makes that dish from a flavor profile perspective.
Now talk a minute about cashews, because I feel like cashews is what really opens up the world for people when they're really wanting. Now, granted, we all know if you eat too many cashews, you're going to put on weight. But the point is, it is certainly healthier for you than. And I can tell you, in our own family, we're very allergic to dairy from the standpoint of congestion creating and things like that. So cashews, because you can, they're so easy to cream them, it truly replaces those gravies, those creamy textures for dips, for desserts. And I know you're going to talk about desserts too. So clue them in on this one. This is awesome.
Yeah, this is a great trick. It's one that I think you're right. Susan, that it's a big game changer for people when they start learning about the way you can turn cashews into a creamy base that you can use to even thicken a soup or a stew, or make the base of a creamy sauce, or I use it in salad dressings to make a salad dressing,
Yes.
kind of have a ranch style dressing consistency without adding a ton of oil or adding mayonnaise or things like that. And it's in part because the cashew, and other nuts have this to a certain extent, but cashews really in particular, if you soak them in water or soak them in stock, and then you put them into a blender or a high-speed blender, you get this incredibly creamy, indecipherable from actual sour cream or cream from a texture component, and very neutral, not super nutty flavor, but a very neutral base flavor that you can really alter to suit your needs. So whether it's something like this that I have showing on screen, which is just a basic cashew cream cheese, or one that's more dressed up. This is cashew cream cheese or cashew cheese being used as a side, like sour cream on top of chili. There are just infinite, this is on top of a baked potato, there's infinite variations. I myself make 3 or 4 different kinds of flavored, cashew cream, just to use as dips and spreads and slathers and things to add into other things. One is, using leftover roasted carrots. So pretty regularly I'll roast, a sheet pan full of rough dice or whole carrots. And, they're incredibly sweet and flavorful, delicious and all this. But if I've got some leftover roasted carrots, I'll just put those in the blender with my cashew and make this bright orange carrot flavored sauce. It's just delicious. It's stunning. And if you add some chilies to that, it makes this almost like pimento cheese style type thing without being the full pimento cheese. You can do the same with greens, kale or edamame or other sorts of things, and really build an amazing base. And it goes savory or it goes sweet. And it's amazing how little you need of the cashew cream to get that that satisfaction in your mouth, that feeling of, oh, wow, that was really creamy. That was really delicious. It felt like I just had a scoop of sour cream or melted cheese or something in a filling or something like that. Really, really phenomenal.
Now, if you would highlight mac and cheese,
Mhm.
and I'll go into this, but of course you can even make a really good queso out of cashews as well.
Mhm.
But mac and cheese, a lot of people make this as a side dish for holiday meals.
Mhm.
It's kind of new, but my husband's family, it's a big thing for them. And then if you could
Yeah.
also highlight dessert too, I think that'd be
Yeah, wonderful. So this is one of our mac and cheese recipes we have. This one actually uses not just cashews for the creamy part, but all these other vegetables. So you get a little bit of the color from carrot, from nutritional yeast. It's got some cashew, of course, some lemon juice for acid. This is a really fun recipe to make. So you blend these things together.
And, yeah, the nutritional yeast, gives it.
And
some
nutritional
cheesiness,
yeast
right?
adds some cheesiness, that kind of little bit of umami, kind of mouth-filling type of flavor. So this is kind of the base sauce that you get from those things. You can add your pasta, your whole wheat noodles to that sauce, just like you're making mac and cheese. Mix it in. You can put a topping on it if you like. This kind of shows the steps, breadcrumbs, topping, and then service. So really delicious. I look at that and I just tell myself, there's no possible way you walk into a potluck or a family meal with that and have people say, ooh, I don't want to eat that. Right? They look at it and they go, wow, look at that texture, the crispy, the crunchy. And they wouldn't think, oh, it's made from ground up cashews and vegetables.
Yeah.
So just a real wow factor, right? Like the kids just will dig right in without you even saying anything. In fact, there's no need to say, oh, this is vegan or plant-based mac and cheese. It's just mac and cheese. And when someone says, oh, how'd you make it? You say, well, it's got all these great things in it. Would you believe it has potatoes and carrots, all these other vegetables and things in it? And they go, wow, because it tastes really good. It tastes really creamy.
Now, what about a dessert? I think you had a pie or something.
Yeah, we had a few options here. Let me go here. We had a Boston cream pie, and I'm a firm believer that, you should really enjoy your food and that there's always time to have something a little bit sweet, whether it's a more decadent dessert like this, or for me, a lot of times when I have dessert, it's a fruit-based dessert, poached fruit or a compote or a parfait or something like that. But this is a really, really delicious recipe that has a few different techniques embedded in it. One working with kind of the cream filling, and one working with this chocolate topper here. But you can see we're just going to walk you through the steps. Baking off the cake part of it itself.
Now, I noticed in the recipe here, it's using cane sugar.
Mm-hmm.
Can you make it without a different sweetener than sugar? Or will it
Yeah, if we specify granulated cane sugar, what we call like a sugar that would be like a white sugar substitute, you can always use, in my world, coconut sugar or maple sugar to replace that. There are also, with many of these recipes, substitutions to use maple, which is one of our preferred sweeteners for people who are using sweetener. But when you're using a liquid sweetener versus a granulated or sugar type, replacement, you've got some liquid things to kind of figure out. But those are some of the things that when you do your submission, we want to hear about, and then we can provide commentary and feedback on.
right? But your point is, if you're going to substitute, make sure it's in the case of dry sugar versus a wet sugar.
Yep.
Right. Okay.
You can see here all the vanilla bean in there, making the cream, cutting the cake in half, slathering in this really delicious plant-based vanilla cream, stacking it, and then doing your essentially what is a plant-based ganache topping.
Wow, nice.
So
Now,
again, when you bring that to a party, I don't think anyone's going to say, I won't eat that because doesn't have real butter or whatever in it, right?
Right. Well, and one thing I want to highlight for people, if they don't know this, one of the reasons you go to all this trouble is if you're eating foods that have sweetener in it, if you can keep it in its whole state, like a whole food plant-based, as they say, then it's like putting speed bumps in on the road so that your body doesn't just pew, and then the gone everywhere and your body didn't have time to process it properly, and now you've got diabetes. So doing it with these other methods that's part of what you're accomplishing. So like, I didn't really pay attention, but I'm assuming that it was probably whole wheat flour instead of refined flour.
Yeah, it's really either way we can help you, or a gluten-free flour in some cases where students come in and they say, well, how do I make this gluten-free? Because, and I'll go back to what I said earlier about part of our premise, because Switch and Rouxbe really start with foundational technique, these recipes almost become a placeholder for a process. So if you want to go in and make the chocolate cream pie, but you have a gluten intolerance, or if you like a certain type of sweetener over another, or you don't like the chocolate part, you want to do a different glaze on top, all that to me is completely possible and fair game within this world. One of the reasons why we never promote ourselves within Rouxbe or Switch as recipe sites is because recipes are really, as strange as it might sound, are really secondary to us in some ways. It's about the technique and the underlying skill and kind of the mindset that you have of going in to know, here's what I might need to modify or adjust, and then having the community in the case of Switch, or the chef support in the case of Rouxbe, to step in and then become that helping hand. So that's part of what we love.
And you make a good point, because everybody's coming from a different place with different scenarios. And to your point, like someone may be focused on, well, the main thing is it needs to be gluten-free. Someone else may be coming at it was like, you know what? like I personally deal with arthritis. So I need to not have tons of sugar. That's a criteria for me. Others, it may be, all that's fine, but I just need to get more plants in our diet. And I'm trying to get my kids to eat without, refusing and things like that. So there's so many scenarios, and it sounds like with Switch, you've made it very user friendly. We're not trying to be one thing to one type of person. It's flexible.
Yeah, 100%. We built Switch exactly with that in mind, that different people are coming to this, and we want to meet people where they are. We want to help people in a positive way that's not going to make them push back on all those other things. So if they're okay with using a certain type of refined flour, well, that's fine, because they might give it up in some other way, but in their dessert, refined flour is fine. They know it's their one time in the week they're going to have that. But otherwise, they're in Switch because they want to learn great ways to eat more root vegetables, or great ways to increase their fiber through eating more lentils or more beans, or they just want great plant-based sauces, because they know if they have all these roasted vegetables or steamed vegetables or salads, that the way for them is just to have an awesome sauce to put on it. So there's so many different approaches. And again, for us, we try not to be the gatekeepers to success. We know that there's a lot of different ways people find success in the kitchen, and they find their new pathway forward with food. We want to be there so that when they're ready to make that change, they're thinking about it in really positive terms, that it's delicious, it's craveable, it's fun. It's not, I cook this way because I have to be healthy. I cook this way because this tastes good. And the result is that I also feel better. And I also am meeting the needs that my doctor might be talking to me about, my heart or my diabetes or my numbers here or there, whatever it might be. But all of us live, in a context. We have families, we have special events, we have things in our world that we can't always control. But with Switch, I feel like for people who are making that commitment, that lifestyle commitment to cook more and eat more fruits and vegetables and plant-based foods, it does provide that really good starting point for people, especially because our attention is on helping you learn to cook. Again, you can bring your own recipe. That's perfectly fine.
Now, one question I want to ask for you, and I'm sure 125,000 users, and you've been doing this all your career, you've probably been hit with everything, every kind of question, every kind of scenario, probably. So the scenario where someone, let's say they've just had something terrible happen, like a heart attack or stroke, or they just had bypass surgery, and they've just been told, you have to change the way you live, the way you eat, you got to start exercising, all these things. And they're just like probably totally distraught, because it's like, I don't even know what you're talking about, So, you go to the Switch site and there's so many beautiful things, but like, what kinds of advice do you give to people that are coming from that scenario?
Yeah, I think for people who come with a real, like a medical need, especially one that comes on the heels of a diagnosis or other sort of potentially traumatic type experience, right? You were hospitalized, or your doctor gave you bad news, and those sorts of things. We're going to probably point you in terms of Switch towards certain types of recipes over others. So you might be more in the no oil type recipe, or you'd search for low fat recipes or salt-free recipes and things like that are going to be not just plant-based, but really more whole food plant-based. So that would be a good starting point for people within the world of Switch. I'll say that, for people who really have a deep therapeutic need and who might even require some sort of an intervention or need more structure. In other words, like, you don't just send me someplace and figure it out, but tell me what to do, sort of an approach. We have a number of products on the Ruby side that do just that. So in particular, our Forks Over Knives program, which is a very, very popular whole food plant-based program, does that for people. It's not a free program. There's a cost involved, and there's a time commitment involved in terms of actually doing the cooking part, because that's the behavior change that we're seeking. But for some of our students who have that very specific, more acute need, we might recommend a Forks Over Knives, or in some cases, our Culinary RX program, which is also whole food plant-based. That's a program we built in collaboration with the Plantrition Project, which is a leading group of physicians and healthcare professionals promoting plant-based eating. So those are things that might, within the Ruby Switch ecosystem, might be more suitable depending on the person. But again, within our world, we really try to meet people where they are so that they find success. And for us, it's about that long-term behavior change. We want to increase people's frequency of cooking. So in other words, how many times are they cooking every week or every month to cook more? We know there's great correlation around that. And we want you to cook foods that are more plant-based when you cook. So increasing your fruit and vegetable consumption, whole grains, legumes, things in that category.
Now, the other question I thought of, and I know we've got like 3 minutes left, but what about people who eat out a lot? How do you help them out in this process?
Yeah, people who are dependent on eating out a lot face a certain challenge. And that challenge is that it's hard to know really what's in your food when you're going out to eat, unless you have a good relationship with a restaurant, it's a place you know. But if you're going out into different restaurants and you're traveling and you're in hotels and this sort of thing, it can become really challenging to kind of know what you're eating. And you can ask the chef or ask the server, hey, what is this made with? Or can you make this plant-based? And sometimes they can accommodate, and sometimes they say they can, but they really can't, right? So it becomes a little bit of a tricky situation for some people. I always recommend for people, if you know you're going someplace, and in particular, if there's something specific that you really want or specific that you can't have, it's good to know that going into the situation. So you might even call ahead and say, hey, I'm bringing in some people, 2 of them are whole food plant-based. One of them has a dairy allergy. One can't have any sort of excess salt, so the food needs to be unsalted when it comes served, and these sorts of things. That way, at least you give them the opportunity to have a heads up, and you're not just showing up and saying, oh, I know you have this menu item. Can't you just make it without these 4 things? And they're going to say, well, yeah, I could, but not with 30 minutes notice on a Thursday night when I've got 100 other people to cook for, right? So
Right.
a day or 2 in advance, if they know you're coming, or if they know there's a certain menu item that you like, it can be really helpful. And to be honest, it's not a thing where chefs and cooks don't want to do the work. It's more about their ability to perform and execute it well in a circumstance where they have no context, no heads up, no warning. They might not even have the product in-house. But if you give them the heads up, I find many are open to it. They see it as a new market. Oh, wow, if I can bring in, if I can have 20 or 30 plant-based meals sold every week, well, heck, that sounds pretty good. Those are going to be low food cost, high margin items without meat and dairy that you can sell on the menu. So there's a lot of good reasons why chefs and cooks want to put them on the menu, but there's reasons why they don't. I always knew that as a working chef, my plant-based items had way fewer food safety risks, had a lower cost overall, and had applicability across other items within the menu. In other words, it didn't get locked out of being part of another menu from other places.
Excellent. Well, we are out of time. I want to thank you so much, Chef Ken, for all your presentation and showing the different recipes and how to use the Switch website, giving some advice. We'll have to do this again very soon. I think this is a topic that is of obvious interest to everybody. And so we'll just keep that going. Let's see. What I'd like to say, if anyone joining us today has any additional questions, feel free to email us at info@brightonheights.org. And be sure to check out the brightonheights.org website to sign up for our newsletter and to see past and upcoming webinars. And just again to remind you, Brighton Heights will be a senior living community where seniors will be empowered to live a healthy and active lifestyle with purpose. Thank you again for joining, and we will see you next time. Take care.
Thank you very much.